Before we begin, I want to set the baseline so we can kind of get a look at the highlights of some of Walter's accomplishments for his career.
Encourage our kids to play sports, because not only in playing sports do you get the possibility of being able to get your school finance in college, but developing social skills, developing leadership skills, developing the ability to work as a unit. These are the types of things that corporate America says, I want you because you have the skills to be able to help my people, my organization, make money.
Walter, thanks again for coming. It's been really wonderful spending time with you during this month on your visit back home. I really appreciate everything you've done, you're doing, and it's great having you here.
It's my pleasure, and I've learned so much about you and others during my conversations since I've been home, because I never knew that Howard White had somebody as accomplished as you as a teammate when you were younger.
Let's start with you talking about your early childhood years. Talk about mentors, influencers, role models. You can use names if you'd like.
It started off naturally in my home. I had a father, Marvin Bowser, who was co-owner of Porter's Cab, and Porter's is right across the street now from where we were actually located, between 20th and 21st Street. He was a disciplinarian, and I found out on many occasions, because contrary to what Stan just read about what I did in life, he did not mention all the other things that gave rise to my father having to let me know how the world works. So I was someone who, as I told Stan recently, whenever the occasion presented itself when I was growing up as a kid, in which I had things to do around the house, I tried to find the most closest window that I could climb out of, because I just simply wanted to be in the streets playing. It didn't make any difference whether or not it was football, touch in the street, hopscotch, pickup sticks, horseshoes. I just needed to be outside. And I guess I was not born as a child to be indoors. And so by being outside, I played a lot with kids in my neighborhood. I played with kids who were older than I, and that helped me a great deal. And then when I was old enough, I then went to the Boys Club and began to play organized sports. And I would say at that time, the most important person at the Boys Club was the director, Mr. Herman Prescott, who lived in Hampton, in the area, doing a lot of things, including what people don't think about too much, table tennis. Back in the day, it was called ping pong. And we had one of the most outstanding ping pong players in the country at that time, a fellow named Ronnie Hobson. And I was actually on the ping pong team with that team, and we got ping pong instructions from a man that came to the Boys Club between 5 and 6. And we got specialized ping pong paddles and everything, and that was the first sport in which I got a trophy in table tennis at Hampton Institute as a runner-up in my age division.
Moving forward, do you have any suggestions on how we might continue to improve that, engaging our youth and keeping them on the right track?
Well, the first thing I believe is you have to be proactive, and you have to literally reach out to our youth. And you have to do that by trying to, one, find out what is the most important thing to these kids today. In other words, I don't know whether or not you take surveys or whether or not you have people who are close to these kids, but find out from the kids what things are of real strong interest to them. And then you begin to figure out what types of activities individuals or groups can do to get these kids engaged first and foremost in things of real strong interest to them. Because hopefully once you develop a relationship with a young person, then maybe you'll be able to introduce some additional things to them once you have developed that closeness. And you will only develop that closeness if you do things that interest the kids. Also, I would suggest that find out who the kids like. Find out the people that they talk about when they're in their little corners. Because these are the people that will be the ones who are likely to have better influence and be able to persuade them to do some things and to potentially eventually go outside of their comfort zone. Now, who these individuals are, it could be someone who is a next door neighbor, it could be somebody in the home, it could be even a buddy, it could be a teacher, it could be a coach, but you need to find out someone who resonates with these kids. And when you find out who that person is, then see if you can employ that person to spend time giving you some ideas about what may make that youngster respond positively to an activity or to an event.
How effective is legislation how will it change the hearts and minds of officers who are always ready to take the lives of Black and brown people?
Legislation that is designed to help is always good, because we have laws in place already that essentially governs the conduct of police officers. We have things in place that are said to, you can do this and you can't do that. Now, we put in Minnesota and also across the country, there's legislation now that's being put in about the chokehold, and everybody knows about the chokehold. There no doubt will be legislation, and I know police policies already exist prohibiting officers from using knee to put pressure on a person's neck like they did on George Floyd. So you had that in place, and you're now trying to do some additional things to teach officers, one, how to de-escalate as opposed to escalate, but still you're dealing with humans. And the fact that they're trying to do some things to get rid of legislation immunizing police officers may actually go a good way in having to scale back police officers in overstepping their bounds. Now, that may make it more difficult, let's say, for an officer in a real difficult situation to effectuate that officer's job, because of concerns the officer may not have the protections that the officers had before. But the question is, on balance, will it end up tipping the scale toward people acting responsibly or not? We won't know that until it's actually put in place and we see how the officers conduct themselves. So legislation is good. I'm for that legislation, and there's national legislation that is actually being done in that regard.
The battle on the basketball court between you and Leroy Keys.
Right.
Because the stories in North Newport News were, of course, they gave Leroy the edge because he was from North Newport News. The truth, I don't know.
No, I can tell you the truth. I mean, there was no edge.
Okay.
I mean, it was a gap.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Leroy Keys was a phenomenal basketball player, football player, and athlete. And if the question were presented to me, and I've told people this over and over, if I had to start a high school basketball team or football team, and if the choice were between Leroy Keys and myself, and someone is going to dare ask, who is the better? Come on, dog. I mean, Leroy was 2 years younger, and so as a 10th grader on the basketball team, I was not looked upon as being a score producer. But they ended up putting me on the best guards in the area, whether that was Leroy Keys from Carver, and I call him Nursey because we're good friends. And then you had Bobby Patterson from Phoenix. Then you had Dwayne Freeman from Bruton Heights. And then you had a James Smith from Union Kempsville. So as a 10th grader, even though I ended up being the third leading scorer on the team, and I was a sixth man, so to speak, I was the primary defensive stopper for anybody who was 6'3" or under. And Leroy averaged about 29 points his senior year. But the box scores that you can look up in the archives will show that he never got 27, 29 points when he played Huntington.
Got it.
He still scored 19 and 20, but I did keep him down as they beat us anyway.
Okay. Based on your body of work and your life, when you mentor people, regardless of the age group, and I'm primarily focusing on the younger age group, is there one compelling or two compelling things you tell them that will guide them?
Well, the first thing you should know about effective mentoring is the mentee must want to be mentored. And oftentimes parents will approach me and others, and parents will try to force a mentoring relationship between a child and me, be it a boy or girl. And you need to find some way to effectively get that person who wants to be mentored to invite that person into that person's life.
Okay.
Because you want to establish a bond of trust and a bond of credibility. And then once you do that, then you find out again what is of interest to that youngster. Because you have to start there, and that's where the trust comes. And then you have to build upon your relationship with that based upon that person's interests. You introduce that person periodically to new things, but you make sure you satisfy that person with that which is important to that child. And then hopefully over time, it expands. Your power over that child, or your influence over that child, expands to a point that you really have helped that child grow. And the last thing I would say is make sure as a mentor, you act in a way that you want that child to act. Don't say certain things to a child about no cussing, or don't use slang as you talk to people. And then around that child, you are cussing and talking to people, because at that point, the mentor begins to lose credibility to the child.
Got it.
And one other thing I want to tell you, just like you said before, you were talking specifically about talking to young people. Mentoring occurs at all points of our lives, at all points. I am mentoring, even as we speak, adults. And it's not because I'm being paid for it or because I wanted to do it. It's because people have come to me on different occasions. They have certain things going on either in their jobs or in their lives. And because of the relationship or the respect they have for me, they might ask me certain things, and I will then share with them some of my thoughts and then move on. So I'm still in the process. I happen to think that athletics and academics can be married together very effectively toward the ends of young people becoming very successful in their lives.
Over the past few years, we've seen an increase in the attention that's given to equity and inclusion. However, a fundamental of equity and inclusion is the right to vote. Yet today we see only 1 in 4 Americans who are registered to vote. What can we do to increase voter participation, particularly from the African American community, but at large, so that we can impact change more directly?
That's a very difficult question from the standpoint of an answer, because we know when the polls come in, when the votes are tallied, we know when you look at the total number of people who are actually registered to vote, and then you look at the sad story of those who actually vote, particularly midterm, you sit back and ask yourself, why can't people become more engaged? We've had voter registration movements, and I will say this, we've been helped a great deal over the past 40 years once community activists have gotten involved in having to encourage people to vote. So I would dare say, if you were to look at the numbers today compared to numbers 25 to 30 years ago, you will probably find that even though our numbers are as low as they are today, they probably are much better than they were 30. So we are making strides, but we do need to continue to do things. Maybe we need to find out from people like Stacey Abrams some of the strategies that she employed to get people to register in Georgia. I know we have registration efforts here in Newport News, because all the time, every time I come home, when you have the event at Congressman Scott's place, I see sign-up sheets for people who come there to register. Whenever there's the Southeast Days parades of old, maybe not now, there were booths set up for people to register. And I think we've gone to community centers, we've gone to churches. So I think we have an elevated interest in trying to get people registered, but you can't drag a horse to a well. You can make things available to people, whether or not it's the ability to register, whether it's getting your vaccine, free vaccines. You can make these things available, but if people have this reticence about doing it, taking the little effort to do that, then you're just not going to be able to get them to do it. But I guess if we're able to get one or two new people, if we can educate young people early of the importance of voting, then maybe that would be real good when you have an 18-year-old go into the home and say, Mama or Daddy, I'm going to vote. Will you go with me? So maybe if we can find some way to stimulate our youth to become more involved with that, maybe that will help as well.
No doubt. Yeah.
What advice do you have for middle and high school kids who are so focused on being professional athletes and versus, getting the Benjamins? So what advice do you have for them so that they don't have to just focus on going pro and getting disappointed?
I would say one thing, getting a college education is extremely expensive. I mean, you're talking about at public schools having to pay close to $40,000 a year just to go to school. Parents may not be able to financially afford a partial payment of that education. I look at athletics for our young kids today, quite frankly, as a means to go to college. Not to be a professional athlete, but to go to college. Enhance your skills by playing. Enhance your academic skills by being able to take care of the core subjects and to be able to take and pass and do a good standardized test score, whether or not it is the SAT or the ACT, because I want to get our young people in college. And if it happens by chance that you're able to take it to the next level, then so be it. But get into college, not have very much expense when you leave college. You have your degree, You can go on to grad school if grad school is something you wish to do, or you can go out into the business world, but you have a skill and you have paper behind you that will help you. So encourage our kids to play sports, because not only in playing sports do you get the possibility of being able to get your school finance in college. These are the types of things that corporate America says, I want you, because you have the skills to be able to help my people, my organization, make money.
So I'd like to thank all of our guests for such thought-provoking and engaging conversations. And I think we should give ourselves a big hand for that.